dignity, and resilience for the most vulnerable. Extreme heat is no longer just a seasonal concern. It is one of the fastest growing humanitarian risks, impacting lives and livelihoods, especially of the poor, the workers, migrants, and those already facing structural disadvantages. Today's session brings together global experts and actors who are leading the way in crafting inclusive, anticipatory, and community-driven solutions. We also mark the launch of special issue of SouthAsiaDisasters.net titled Heat as a Humanitarian Crisis, What Local Organizations Are Doing, which captures field experience, research, and bold recommendations for policy and practice. On behalf of AIDMI and START Network, I warmly welcome all our speakers and participants. We are glad to have you with us for this important exchange. To open our session and launch the special issue, I invite Ms. Joyce, Senior Network Development Advisor at START Network UK. Ms. Joyce is an expert in building humanitarian infrastructure and systems that enable locally led crisis response globally. Over to you, Joyce. Many thanks for joining.
Thank you very much, Vishal. That was a great framing and introduction. I'm wondering if I can share my slides, but if not, I could talk through. Do you think I could share my slides? You will need to bring down this to allow me to do that.
Yes, just. So you are co-host, you can share your slide, or my colleague can do that.
You need to bring this slide that is up, down. I don't know if that is possible before I can share. Oh, yes, okay. Now it's working. Thank you very much. So just give me a few minutes to actually be able to frame the conversation this afternoon. And excited to be here again. Greetings from Kenya. And yeah, when you think about extreme heat and what local organizations are doing, I think the issue that we are launching today has a collection and a wealth of experience from what local organizations have actually been doing. But for us to actually be able to frame this conversation better, I just had to reflect on my own personal journey with heat. And being born and brought up in Mombasa, those of us who know Kenya, Mombasa is a coastal, beautiful city. I grew up appreciating that here. I actually need to know how to cope with the heat in that city. But it was only after I had an opportunity to still grow up and live Mombasa, and I found myself in the Dadaab refugee camp, which is located somewhere in northern Kenya. And I had an opportunity to work there for 5 years. And again, I experienced heat at another level. And I began to appreciate that it's not just heat, it's actually heat that has an impact to communities. And the best way for me to really reflect and appreciate what extreme heat is when I reflect on it from my local language. And so joto kali in Swahili really resonates to that extreme heat. And as we think about what local organizations can actually do about extreme heat, it is important that we need to begin framing extreme heat from a local and an indigenous perspective. But when I look at the wealth of contribution in the issue that we are actually launching today, we are appreciating that extreme heat is not a one-time event. Some people have talked about extreme heat being a health and a climate crisis. But this issue reflects on extreme heat actually being a humanitarian crisis. And that humanitarian crisis requiring all various efforts from different actors, but acknowledging that local actors are well framed and best positioned to actually be able to lead in this particular action. And yeah, I think the issue, and I hope you will enjoy reading some of the reflections from both local and global perspective on how we can recognize extreme heat as a humanitarian crisis. But there's a big focus on the need for anticipatory and early warning systems and highlighting the risks that vulnerable communities actually face as a result of extreme heat. I think going ahead, we are now acknowledging, it's now being acknowledged that extreme heat is recurring, extreme heat is widespread, and extreme heat is actually deadly. And when you look at what many actors have said, including UNDRR, I'm glad we have a representative here today, both WHO and even the World Meteorological Organization, they are preparing us that this extreme heat is not going to end any soon. It's actually going to continue to escalate as years go by, that it's going to be warmer and warmer. And as we think about the rising temperature that are leading to both frequent and severe extreme weathers, such as heat waves, droughts, floods, and storm, let us remember at the back of all these changes are communities who are affected, communities who are already facing different vulnerabilities, and hence a more integrated approach on managing those extreme heats is what we are calling upon in our conversation today. And yeah, the headlines may not be as glaring and as big as you will expect, but there's quite a lot that is already happening when you think about extreme heat. And it's gaining attention day by day. But even as it gains the attention from a headline perspective, a bigger question for us today is, are communities really prepared? Are we all prepared to actually be able to deal with extreme heat in the level that it's required to be dealt with a humanitarian crisis at local and at a global level? So many communities, just like I told you my own personal stories, still treat extreme heat as heat, because you have either grown up with this heat, and even as it gets warmer, you cannot differentiate that it has reached a threshold where it has actually become a crisis. We need to acknowledge and frame that it is silent and it is slow. When there is an earthquake, there'll be big headlines and everybody will hear about it. But it will take some time before we can get a headline that indeed heat waves are happening. It's invisible. We need to acknowledge that there is lack of awareness. I think about my mother when she calls me and it's very hot from Mombasa. She'll only remind me, it's slightly hot today. It's hotter than any other day. So acknowledging that communities themselves have not really been prepared to actually be able to tell when extreme heat becomes a crisis. We know that we have relied on indigenous knowledge, but sometimes this may limit early action. You have lived there for some time, and yeah, you have relied on traditional practices and adaptation at community level, but we need to acknowledge that as extreme heat recurs more, we also need to think about other anticipatory action methods and mitigation methods that work. Inequality and marginalization, as doing a bit of reading, and I know people talk about coolers as being one of the ways to mitigate extreme heat. How many can afford those coolers is a bigger conversation that we want to have in our framing today. But there's also inadequate localized evidence and predictive models. Start Network, where I belong, we really talk about anticipatory action, but I think there's more that really needs to be done on anticipatory action, focusing on extreme heat. And even as I finalize, I don't want to overemphasize, think about extreme heat as a climate crisis, but we need to go back and think about the communities that are really affected and think about what's really is the impact of extreme heat. Overall, we look at impacts that really make them even more vulnerable. One of the key things that you look at is poverty, other existing humanitarian conditions, other health system factors, but also the fact that we have already said that extreme heat in itself is not an event, but it triggers other cascading effects, fires, droughts, food and water shortages. Hence, really thinking about what could be the best anchorage in terms of what local organizations can do to mitigate and prepare communities to manage extreme heat. And as I get to finalize, I wanted to just be able to emphasize that there is a central role of local organizations. When you think about anticipatory action, we are talking about locally led anticipatory action, so that whatever we are predicting and whatever we are modeling is actually locally led and understands that particular context. We are looking at the local organizations being very central in mitigation. How can they promote heat resilience infrastructure, education, and early warning system? And when you talk about education, I'm drawn to one of the articles and contributions in this issue from South Sudan that really talks about how extreme heat resulted to schools actually being closed. It's happening, and we need to take action. We think about the central role of local organization from a response perspective. How do we coordinate targeted support with a focus on vulnerable communities and residents? What can work in Mombasa may not actually be the same targeted solution that can work in Pakistan. And so we really need to put central role of local organization in response as well as in recovery. But overall, we think about locally from a perspective of building resilience. And building resilience will require all of us to really be involved, from communities to governments to academia. But central to all this in building resilience and adaptation is community-led solutions that are required. And in my final, just to give you a recap of some of the key highlights and recommendations from this issue, there is need to really harness indigenous knowledge and community learning. A lot has been said, but when you think about adaptation, you need to recognize that adaptation begins with what communities already know, their assets, their capacity, and their accumulated generation of learnings. They can tell what has worked and what has not worked, including understanding and appreciating their own vulnerability. We need to accelerate policy action at all levels. Governments really need to recognize extreme heat as a disaster and enact the relevant policies. There is more that really needs to be done to finance anticipatory action, mitigation, prevention, and response. We need to think about the strengthening capacities and sharing knowledge widely. And I think about communities and communities. Are they really aware that extreme heat is indeed a humanitarian crisis that needs to be managed? We need to pursue integrated climate and development action. Heat waves are not isolated. So when you think about heat waves, you think about multi-sector approaches. You think about layering different approaches to make this work. Let's think about investing in technology and infrastructure innovation, but we really need to harness community involvement in this process to enhance ownership and sustainability. But most importantly, do we have local evidence to support anticipatory action, local evidence to really be able to support responses, mitigation, and protection. And as I finalize, I think the interesting bit is that there's quite a lot that local organizations have done. And this issue just frames that there is the power of local organization in being able to tackle extreme heat cannot actually be overemphasized. We need to document more. And yeah, I hope you'll find this an interesting read, even as we get into the conversations today and further policy actions and engagements to be able to tackle extreme heat as a humanitarian crisis. Thank you for listening to me, and back to you, Vishal.
Thank you so much, really, Joyce, for that thoughtful start and for launching the issue, highlighting local action on extreme heat. I really like the point that you mentioned, particularly 2 points. One, on the perception of the community, which is very much important in this case. And second, you mentioned about the assessment, but from the community perspective aspect that you have shared. Really important. We all, as a practitioner, as a researcher, need to, focus on these areas. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mr. Andrew Spazowke, Portfolio Manager, Early Warning for All at UNDRR Geneva. Mr. Andrew has over 20 years of experience working in the field of disaster risk reduction across Asia and Africa. Welcome, Mr. Andrew. Over to you.
So much, Vishal. I'm wondering if I can share my screen or whether you will do that on your side.
Either way, what is your choice?
If you can do it, I think it's probably easier.
Yeah, okay.
While you're doing that, Vishal, a big thank you to you and to the organizers for inviting you and DRR to join this virtual roundtable. Obviously, we're meeting during another year of deadly record-breaking temperatures. We know that this threat is vast. We know it's existential for many, and we know it's happening now. So at UNDR, we see the need for extreme heat risk governance as coming into sharper focus. Yet we find many nations, many cities, societies, and systems are unprepared to address this escalating threat. So what I'd like to do is to share with you how some of of UNDR's own plans are being shaped this year and in the years ahead, not only in terms of UN-wide support, but also some of our initial thinking and plans align with our support mandate to UN member states to achieve the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my, if we can get the next slide up. Oop.
I think you have started sharing
Oh, I
your
have.
slide.
So you can see it. Okay. So thanks so much. So in terms of extreme,
I'm sorry. We can see
we don't need
the
the
slide as well
notes.
as your notes.
We don't need the notes.
sorry.
Or you just stop sharing. We will keep continue sharing our from our
Okay.
side. That
Let's
will
do
be easy for both the side. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So for those of you who are familiar with UNDR's advocacy role, our global convening mandate, and our programming, we're very much adopting a systems thinking lens and approach to extreme heat. We recognize that this is exacting a significant human toll. We see that heat-related deaths are averaging just short of 500,000 annually between 2000 and 2019. The economic impacts, as we all know, are staggering and growing. We estimate economic losses at around 863 billion in 2022, just owing to reduced labor capacity alone. We know that these risks impact around 2.4 billion people. This is leading to also around 23 million injuries annually. And we're seeing reduced global working hours that are equivalent to around 80 million full-time jobs by 2030. We all can see also the impacts it's having on agriculture sector, on food security, increased vulnerability for heat stress, impacting crop productivity, our infrastructure, our power grids, transport networks, accelerating, we're seeing accelerating degradation. We're seeing our impact on essential services like healthcare and education outcomes. And we're seeing the environmental consequences, water shortages, plant stress, wildfire risk due to drying of landscapes. We know that the oceans that are already absorbing around 90% of excess heat since around 1900 are already suffering elevated temperatures that are devastating marine habitats, affecting fisheries, and the communities that are dependent on these industries. Next slide, please. So we have a general sense of where we are now. What we know is that when we look at the kind of characteristics, we have very fragmented, uncoordinated policies to address heat risk. We have very reactive short-term crisis management approaches. Many countries lack clear roles and responsibilities. We have data gaps. We have a limited investment and financial mechanisms to address extreme heat. And what we're also seeing is lack of, as Joyce underscored, community-driven solutions that address those who are most vulnerable. If we look at where we are now and where we need to be, UNDRR, in concert with other partners, is moving towards more risk-informed investment strategies, more targeted funding, having more data-driven decision-making and informed policies. And what we want to do is take a more proactive, long-term approach to heat risk reduction. And I think this point was also underscored by Joyce in her remarks. Next slide, please. So last year, I think hopefully many of you are aware, the UN Secretary General released a call to action on extreme heat, right? To prevent and reduce heat risk, to increase our resilience to heat, because we know it is only going to increase unless we see concerted action, climate action, and to manage heat crises. Again, this was underscored by Joyce's heat as a local and humanitarian crisis, and to mitigate its worst impacts. Next slide, please. So as we are working towards broad partnerships and advocating for improved extreme heat risk governance, one of our first steps is to help countries move in a stepwise fashion where they not only improve their understanding of heat risk, and we recognize heat risk is defined differently and needs to be defined differently depending on the country and local context. They need to understand options around heat governance, moving towards a multi-hazard approach, accessing your governance readiness. So your local governments, municipal, city government, national governments, how are they working together to improve collective outcomes on extreme heat governance? What we also want to see is more action on planning and action plans to address heat, what we call resilient heat action. So one of the activities that UNDRR is focusing on this year and in the years to come is the development with other partners of what we're calling a toolkit for extreme heat risk governance. And what we want to do is ensure that this toolkit is applicable regardless of the context, regardless of the governance context of a country. And what we want to do is ensure that partners have these common understanding of risk and can see where they are on a scale of improvement on how they're managing risk. Next slide, please. So you hopefully are able to see some of this. So what we're developing is a tool to help countries evaluate their current capabilities and what are some of the short, medium, and long-term kind of intervention pathways they could take to improve their governance of extreme heat risk, to ensure that those most vulnerable are given pride of place in those action plans. And what we will be focusing on this fall, in connection with a number of global events, is the release of this toolkit that will now allow comparison between regions and countries of how they are actually making investable action plans and how they're moving across this continuum, or as we call stages for heat risk governance. Next slide, please. So what this guide is, it's really to focus on a starting point which leaders, policymakers, practitioners, researchers can use as a starting point, as a baseline to inform what needs to be improved across the policy landscape, the investment landscape, and sectoral practices. It's not meant to be a normative guide. It's not meant to imply that the guidance applies equally in all scenarios, but it is meant to allow for UN member states to ask themselves some key questions around heat governance. And at UNDRR, in concert with other UN partners, we very much look forward to bringing together UN member states so they can learn from each other where they are on their risk governance spectrum. Next slide, please. So this work is informed through a very wide consultative process. India has been part of this process. You can see some of the member states that have informed some of the development of this draft guidance. It's also being built up through a broad consortium linking together WMO, the Global Heat and Health Information Network, Global Nation, Duke University, a number of MDBs and UN organizations, the C40 network, ICLEI, etc. So our plans for this fall is to test, scale, and finance the scale up of a risk governance toolkit that can be adopted by UN member states. We're looking for pilot countries, some of which have already come forward, and cities who can actually work through this UN toolkit to help them address and crowd in finance to address increasing challenge of extreme risk. I'm going to stop there. I was asked to stick to the timetable. Again, I guess my final message is we know that the days of business as usual are gone, and every investment we can make in adapting to extreme heat stress today will serve us exponentially down the road. I would want to leave with what the UN General Secretary said, that we have no choice but to rise to the challenge of rising temperatures. So I very much look forward to this discussion and to take your questions once we've heard from other presenters. Thanks so much, and back to you, Vishal.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for setting the global frame as well as also emphasizing the need for early action and sharing the toolkit and also the country examples. Now we turn to local leader working at the intersection of climate, health, and community empowerment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Joy, a UNFCCC certified climate and health advocate from Uganda. Dr. Joy leads climate smart public health outreach, youth education, and national climate health policy engagement, including Uganda's COP29 preparation. Over to you, Dr. Joy. And thank you, participants who have shared their questions, some of in the chat, and a couple of I also received directly. Thank you. Over to Dr. Joy, please.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone from various parts of the world. Hope I'm audible. Am I audible? Can I share my screen?
Please.
Can I share my screen? I'm going to share a document. Is it fine? Can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Yes, the human cost of rising temperatures and the local solutions making a difference. So I'm a doctor, PharmD, pharmacist by profession. So I tend to approach the climate crisis from a health point of view. I'm a bit biased towards the health sector because I strongly believe that perhaps if you are to argue policymakers and the world at large that actually climate change is also affecting human health, maybe we shall see more action. We shall see more urgent solutions instead of we tend to see we tend not to meet our targets. But perhaps if we are to make the argument for human health, we may make some progress. So the global temperatures are rising each year, with 2024 being the warmest year on record. We've all experienced it, all continents, be it Europe, be it Africa, be it South America. We can no longer deny it that global temperatures are rising. Heat is rising in the planet. Those are the numbers above pre-industrial levels. So these temperatures, we've always had heat, like during the summer. My country, which is next to the tropics, of course, is for the bigger part of the year, it's usually hot. But now what we've noticed with climate change in the 21st century is that high temperatures due to increased frequency, duration, and intensity of these heat events. When you go to the World Health Organization website, when they mention the vulnerable populations, you will see that the subtropics and the tropics, the regions next to the equator, they're starting to warm up a bit higher than normal. We are different communities, as the earlier speakers have mentioned, accustomed to levels of heat. For example, people in the Sahara are obviously more adaptive to heat than people in Europe. But even those people who are used to that heat, they've noticed that there's a slight increase in that, and this is affecting communities. Those are the numbers. 37% of heat-related deaths are attributed to in climate change. Maybe what I would draw attention to is that fatalities among those over 65 are increasing, and we shall see later that among the vulnerable populations are the elderly. Here, we are talking about people over 65 years of age, the elderly, children, sick, pregnant women, outdoor
Dr.
workers.
Joy.
Yes?
I'm sorry. Is it okay if we can share the slide
Okay.
and request you? Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. Have you reached on the most vulnerable? That slide. Okay. We are looking at the people who are most affected. So that when we are in our communities, we know how to tailor our policies to the most vulnerable in our communities. The children, the elderly, the sick, pregnant women. The research showing that it can lead to higher levels of miscarriage in women, the outdoor workers. We are seeing that these people are affected more, both directly and indirectly. School-going children are missing classes. Outdoor laborers, the people who live hand to mouth, the their economy lags behind because of excessive heat. All these things are piling up within our communities. So we need to find a way perhaps of reaching these vulnerable people when we are creating policies to deal with extreme heat, because these are the people who are most affected. As we know, many lack access to cooling, clean water, or healthcare. The injustice here, as we talk about heat, is that the people in the tropics, or the people in the people in the tropics, or the people in warmer climates, have not contributed much to this issue of extreme heat. They've not really benefited from the forces behind climate change. What I mean, industrialization. So when we are perhaps looking for funding for our community interventions, when we are in our conferences of those going to COPs, perhaps they should also raise this issue of how heat is pushing this climate injustice. There are people who are there are people who should fund policies to help communities. The people who should fund loss and damage. There are people who've benefited from from industrialization. I'm talking about the wealthier nations. Urgent action is needed to help communities adopt rising temperatures. So in my presentation, I'm going to talk about various unique interventions, how different organizations are helping their communities. I hope these interventions can also motivate you to help your community. There are different regional solutions that various actors are pushing within their communities. For example, this is in New York City. There are organizations that have partnered up with the mayor's office to initiate what we call the Cool Roofs Initiative. When the buildings are built in New York, they are making sure that there are white coatings on the rooftops to help reduce heat. Of course, we all know that white like repels heat. Involving the mayor's office and in their building plans indirectly helps the community deal with the urban heat island within cities. So these school roofs reflect sun, combat urban heat, and causes city temperatures to go down by at least 5 to 7 degrees warmer. It's a collaboration with the mayor's office, and they make sure they target the communities of color. They make sure they target people perhaps who really can't afford perhaps this kind of roofing. The more vulnerable communities in New York are what like they really seek when they implement this initiative, the Cool Roofs Initiative. We go to this initiative of SC redistribution in Brooklyn. A group of youths within their community noticed that when residents move, or when they're upgrading to, let me say, a bigger building, they usually dump their ACs, and those ACs are sometimes in good condition. So they noticed that other community members during summer need ACs and others are dumping them. So they came up with an idea that why don't we redistribute these ACs from the people who don't need them, from people who are moving, to the people who need them. So this is how they've come up with a solution for their community. Like they redistribute ACs, and even they even fund the transport and take these ACs to the people who need them but can't afford them. Obviously, you notice that perhaps different communities have different resources. This perhaps, I know for sure this won't work in my community because automatically people in my community really don't use ACs. But for those who can, they can pick up this idea and implement it in their communities. Then the last one is the greening. One of the ways which you can use to combat heat, a local solution which is affordable and sustainable, is of course planting more trees. There's a group of youths within my country. They planned, they sat down and said, like, our green cover is green cover is reducing within the capital city and heat is increasing. So what can we do? The thought of planting more trees in planting more trees in public spaces within the city. So they partnered up with the local city authority, and the local city authority allowed them and even funds them to implement greening the city in an effort to reduce heat, and they even involve the community in this effort and even sensitize the community. They hope that perhaps in 2 or 3 years, when these trees grow, they can help the community deal with heat. I think this is a solution that can be picked up since it's affordable and sustainable. So this is how different organizations are coming up with ideas to help their communities deal with excessive heat. It depends on your community, but what at least we learned from this organization is that they are not sitting down, and some of these ideas are really not bulky, they are not abstract, they're actually doable, simple, and they're not out of the blue, which means we can still help our communities even with the limitations, even without the funding. I was in a meeting recently with the Ministry of Health, and they're even thinking of maybe sensitizing the public now that maybe you should start using sunscreens mostly on days when there is a lot of sun. Those are the ideas that are being thrown around. So we can even start campaigns to issue when we can start campaigns like can encourage people to carry water, we can encourage people to carry umbrellas, we can encourage people to use shades. All this can help our communities deal with excessive heat. Yes, that's a take home. Local action is powerful and effective, as we've seen. It's when we come together as communities, we can really help each other. We can help each other. Let's not be too. We tend perhaps in the climate space to think that let's wait for this funding, let's wait for this policy. But we can use our own ideas, as we've seen with these examples, to help our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. And yes, locally led action is powerful action. Thank you for sharing your perspective on local driven climate action and also the city country level case examples. Looking at time, our final speaker is Ms. Revati Ramkumar, Deputy Hub Manager at India Humanitarian Hub, part of START Network. She brings deep expertise in local humanitarian coordination, resilience building, and stakeholder engagement across Indian states. Revati will share how Indian organizations are addressing heat risk through practical and people-centered strategy. Please go ahead, Revati. Over to you.
Thank you, Vishalji. Would you mind sharing the slides of mine? Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Greetings, everyone. I'm truly honored to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on such an important and timely topic. And without further ado, let me begin the presentation. So today would be my extreme heat as a humanitarian crisis, local organizations leading resilience efforts. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes. So rising heat waves, unveiling the underlying climate crisis. Extreme heat is no longer just an environmental concern. It's becoming one of the most urgent humanitarian crises of our time. With increasing frequency and severity of heat waves, the effects are devastating, from rising mortality rates to heat strokes, crop failures, and disruptions in livelihoods. Vulnerable groups such as the elderly, children, individuals in insecure livelihoods, informal workers, and communities facing socio-economic hardships. While many discussions focus on infrastructure or top-down policy, and I think a lot of things are happening around us globally, and I think my presentation today will focus on the role of local organizations, the unsung heroes, leading community level resilience efforts against extreme heat. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, local organizations' response to extreme heat. They play a critical role during extreme heat events. They act as first responders, providing water, shelter, and real time information. They have a deep understanding of the community's needs, behaviors, and vulnerabilities. One powerful example is the Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan, led in collaboration with local NGOs, municipal officials, and public health experts. It was one of the first city-level heat action plans in South Asia, and included measures like training health workers, opening cooling centers, and issuing early warnings. Since its implementation, heat-related deaths in Ahmedabad have dropped significantly. This is a clear example of how local coordinated action saves lives. Next slide, please. Role of local organizations in community support. What makes local organizations so effective is their ability to tailor solutions. In Tamil Nadu, Chennai, for instance, a women-led collective called Pint Urimai Iyakam partnered with city officials to identify the needs of elderly and disabled people during heat waves, ensuring they were not left out of public safety plans. Local NGOs are well positioned to communicate effectively in local languages using culturally sensitive messaging and even street theater or WhatsApp groups. These groups are not just intermediaries, they are leaders in their own right. Next slide, please. The heat wave preparedness activities, I would say the preparedness activities are one of the most important ways local groups reduce the human impact of extreme heat. In Odisha, for example, Asha and Anganwadi workers are being trained to recognize early signs of heat stress and dehydration. Local NGOs in Delhi slums run awareness drives using mobile vans and loudspeakers to alert communities before heat waves hit. As Joyce said, how her mother was predicting the temperature of heat. Like so, that was an individual. So collectively, this is some of the local NGOs. Initiative. Another impactful intervention is repurposing of public buildings like Anganwadi centers, temples, libraries as temporary cooling shelters, especially during the hottest hours of the day. These actions don't require massive budgets, just community trust and coordination, I believe. Next slide, please. Heat risk mitigation strategies. When we think of mitigation, we often think of large scale infrastructure, but local innovation is playing a huge key role. In Nagpur and Hyderabad, local partners are leading cool roof programs using low cost reflective paints to reduce indoor temperatures by up to 5 degrees Celsius. In Delhi, the organization Seeds India equips schools in high risk areas with water kiosks and shaded play areas to protect children during peak heat hours. These are simple, replicable, scalable, and most importantly, they are created by and for the communities who face the heat every day, literally every day. Next slide, please. Real world innovations by local organization. I would, like we could bring tons and tons of examples, but I'm just sharing a very few powerful innovations being led by local actors. So, as I said earlier, Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan, a benchmark for city-led preparedness. Seats India bringing heat-safe education to informal settlements. Asha workers in Odisha are trained to track heat illness during daily health visits. Cool roof programs in Hyderabad and Nagpur, community-driven and low-cost. And in the Philippines, local groups run barangay-level cooling shelters. And in Karnataka, women-led water governance teams manage supply during peak summer, ensuring equitable access. These examples shows us the solution are already here. We just need to recognize and support them. So next slide, please. Yeah. So the synergy of sustainable living elements. Heat resilience also means building sustainably. Local organizations are promoting passive cooling designs, green roofs, tree planting drives, and better ventilation. These aren't just technical features, they become part of communities' living culture. The goal is not just to endure heat, but to adapt and thrive through energy efficient and community supported spaces. Yeah, next slide, please. Yes, this is the resilient spaces and traditional architecture. So during our visit to Karaikudi in Tamil Nadu, where one of the local organizations called VOCRDC, they gave their immense support to make this happen. We saw firsthand how traditional practices can offer modern solutions. Homes built with Atangudi tiles, lime plastered walls, and verandas are naturally cooler, requiring no air conditioning. The handloom tradition of Karaikudi is renowned for its intricate weaves and rich cultural heritage, reflecting the craftsmanship of Chettinad region. Those are breathable textiles, natural fiber textiles. They offer practical comfort, helping to keep the body cool in extreme heat. These methods are not only effective, but they are also rooted in local knowledge and sustainable living, offering us a blueprint for heat resilient construction. Next slide, please. So this is about the water management cycles for heat waves. So heat waves don't come alone. They bring water stress with them. So our local organizations, all of them are teaching communities to harvest rainwater, reuse grey water, and monitor distribution using simple tools. In parts of rural Karnataka, women-led water committees use mobile apps and smart meters to ensure that tanks are filled fairly and sustainably. So managing water wisely is key to protecting health and livelihoods during extreme heat. So I would say that, like, to conclude, extreme heat is a humanitarian emergency, but it's also a call to action. Local organizations are already leading the way. They are innovating, adapting, and supporting their communities, often without much expectations on recognition or funding. So I would say that, like, let's not just acknowledge them, let's invest in their capacity, scale their ideas, and place them at the center of our heat resilient strategies. So that's all from my side. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thanks to you for really live examples across India, as well as also linking with the community perspective. Thank you to all our speakers for such insightful and inspiring presentations, and a real one, very much connect with the current reality. It is good to see that already chat question and answer taking place in the chat box. However, as we have received several questions, I would like to request each speaker if they would like to share their, based on so far question in the chat box, in just 1 minute or so, one by one, to each speaker for a minute. And we also have later on a couple of questions which we have received that can be also targeted. My first request to Joycey, please.
Vishal, and to the other speakers, it's been insightful listening to all of you. Quite a lot is happening. I think we need to document more. I think there are a few questions on what data are we relying on. I think it's nice to rely on temperature data and climate predictions, as we always talk about, but a lot of it also is data on anticipatory action, and that's a lot. There's quite a lot of examples on the work that START Network is doing, particularly like in Pakistan, to support anticipatory action systems. But I think the most powerful data is trying to focus on an analysis of the impact of heat waves. Unfortunately, people only take actions when the impact can actually be well articulated. Sometimes you can warn, but we now have adequate data to actually be able to demonstrate that indeed extreme heat is an emergency. It's a humanitarian crisis that really needs to be addressed. The other questions that I've seen on the chat are around centering local organizations to actually be able to address extreme heat. And I think just echoing what everybody has said, extreme heat and its impact can be localized. It's about how communities are affected because of their other vulnerabilities. So more and more is actually required to be able to document what exactly local organizations are doing.
Whiteboard corner.
I think that's what I say. And I'm excited about the toolkit that is being developed by UNDRR. I think such toolkits and evidence is actually needed to push both global and local action. And even being able to really document some of those community innovations, those that are working, and even if they don't work, learnings from those community innovations would really be great. I think that's what I can say for now, but really exciting engagements on the chat.
Thank you. Now requesting Andrew from UNDRR, please.
Yes, thanks so much, Vishal. I think there was reference to helping countries better understand and quantify the impacts that extreme heat events are having on multiple systems, whether it's the health sector, education outcomes, some of the infrastructure vulnerabilities that we're seeing, whether it's in power conveyance, etc. And I put in the chat just reference to the San Diego network, which was launched recently. UNDR co-hosts the San Diego network with UNOPS. It's a technical assistance facility where the funds go directly to governments to help them address some of these challenges around quantifying loss and damage through both rapid onset events, but also slow onset events. Extreme heat obviously is exacting a heavy economic and social toll on many countries, where we have now multilateral finance instruments like the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, which still needs to be capitalized. While that is taking place, there is still need for countries to come together and learn from each other, and that's what the San Diego network is meant to do. There was some reference to the toolkit that's under development. Again, just to underscore that as that takes shape across the multiple partners and the consultations that have already happened, there will be more formalized consultations this fall where we want to assemble not only learnings from local action on extreme heat, but also how governments are taking the reins on risk governance for extreme heat events. And what we want to do is multiply, catalyze some of the good examples that are both in the chat and that some of the other speakers reference, so that we can see, again, a stepwise improvement in how we're collectively as countries, as UN member states, coming together to ensure that extreme heat doesn't undermine the SDGs. I can't see of any situation where the SDGs can be improved with these climate shocks that are growing in intensity and frequency. And extreme heat is probably the one that is the most under quantified at the moment. But at the same time, we know that there's very positive civil society-led action. It was underscored, whether it's through anticipatory action, locally led development, new technologies. I saw in the chat around painting infrastructure and reducing urban heat island effect. We need to take stock of what is working and as importantly, what's not working to avoid maladaptation to extreme heat. So let me end there with and happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Andrew, really, for sharing the Santiago network, as well as also about the performance of these cool solutions, which is very much important. Now we have many examples, and also about the how it works and what is the performance of this adaptation and mitigation measures. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Joy.
Yes, I think I had two questions from the chat. One was asking if the pool roofs are fire resistant. Yes, the authorities have a code of compliance. They have a code of compliance. They make sure that all the materials used are safe. And in their nature, the materials used are like silicone and acrylic. They're really not, they're really fire resistant. They're not combustible. And also that all this is done within the standards of like the authorities, and the authorities always make sure like they have inspectors, make sure that everything is safe and okay for all the residents involved. So they're really safe even when it comes to fire. Another person was asking about finances of these initiatives and efforts. From my personal experience, what I can say, the ones I've been part of, it's of course about lobbying from the usual funding sources of government, city authorities. But sometimes you do get donations of trees, tree seedlings to plant for those initiatives. And then for the SC people are redistributing SCs. Sometimes they put in their own input, and sometimes they get also donors and well-wishers for these initiatives. That's all from me.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Revati ji?
Oh, yes. So I have just pasted some of the links to get the Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan. It's not only the that is publicly accessible, as it is a government endorsed initiative developed in collaboration with local and international partners. So they can just download from there. And the other thing is so the cool roof interventions were like primarily applied in residential and community buildings. So it was also implemented in schools as well. So that were applied only onto the rooftops as most of the effective and cost efficient surface. And yes, that was a cooperative study as well. So these initiatives were community driven and led by local partners in collaboration with NGOs and some local governments. So yes, I just pulled all the practices which is being practiced earlier, and it is also currently under use. So this is all collaged into one. Hope we will get more and more in practices as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Revati ji. Thank you for the engaging questions and valuable reflections. To conclude today's session, I invite Mr. Mihir Albert, Director of All India Disaster Mitigation Institute. He's a pioneer in linking disaster risk reduction, humanitarian action, and climate resilience through locally led innovations. He will share closing thoughts and a way forward. Over to you, Mihir, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishal Bhai, and all the good words for me. None of that is true. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Good. Michael Slingsby, I'm so glad you are there again, and thanks for sharing what you have. Please note that in the chat. I'm going to do draw from what has been presented very quickly and list some way ahead, both in terms of action and research. But before I do that, I do want to again emphasize the Nelson Mandela Day that we are reminded. And his powerful words come to my mind about what he said, and almost accurately, that overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity, it is an act of justice. And I think same could be applied to extreme heat, that overcoming impact of extreme heat on the poor and vulnerable is not a gesture of charity or development. It's an act of justice. So from that point of view, let's look at some of the possible way ahead. There's a long list, and what an excellent presentation choice you and Andrew, of course, Revati ji, you have done. So I think one is this whole issue of recognizing heat as a disaster, and that's not quite settled yet. From the presentations, we also saw that, and from the other work that we all are doing. So countries, local authorities, municipal corporations at every level this recognizing heat as a disaster, something that is recognized by the authorities, and therefore actions taken are as per the rules and regulations, and actions not taken could be questioned that why, in spite of it being recognized, it's not questioned. So that's something I draw from Joyce and Andrew, your presentation. The toolkits are there, will be available. Other country plan will be there. But before that, countries and communities and everything in between need to recognize disaster as something which is disaster, extreme heat as a disaster. So that's one, and that needs training, it needs exposure, it needs advocacy very much, and START Network is very well suited to do that through its partners. Andrew, you are already doing it, and UNDRR will support others to do that as well, both in a gentle way and sometimes nudging, but that needs to be done. The second action that I draw from the presentations that are made here is to fund, and Revati very clearly said investment, to fund anticipatory locally led action. And I'd like to add that not only fund, but add that fund anticipate locally actions first. I think what's happening is that a lot of whatever money is being spent on heat is more spent at deciding how to go about addressing extreme heat. But if we started first funding local actions, I think there would be far more rapid way of finding what needs to be done. This is not to say we don't need frameworks, of course we do, but funding first locally led actions is something which is coming out. START Network already does that, and India Habitat Hub also is focused on that, but that needs to be far more common in the South Asian region. The third is strengthening early warning system for the affected population. So not early warning system per se for the city or for the ward, but specifically groups of affected population by extreme heat, such as fishermen, such as construction workers, such as small businesses out on the street, for example, road repair workers. So part of that is being done by Indian Meteorological Department, but far more such categories needs to be identified and pointed out, and make sure that that early warning and therefore early action on that anticipatory action takes place. And that's third. And the fourth one is the way ahead is to document local knowledge and impacts of global guidelines and direction. So a lot of global guidelines are coming up, directions are coming up. They are very useful, mainly drawing from scientific knowledge, but there is already existing local experience as well as local material. And we need to make sure that that is taken care of, addressed, used, utilized in such guidelines and directions. So on one hand, we need something which is universal, but we also need something which is very specific, and that balance needs to be gained. And the last one, the list is long, but I'll stop there, is that to make heat actions a matter of justice. So if we follow Mandela's vision, let us build a humanitarian response that protects the most vulnerable heat-affected people with dignity and fairness. We should start from there. So as we move forward, let's remember that every degree of heat we reduce, every life we protect, every local action we support is a step towards justice. I'd like to thank the panel members again and all the participants. Thank you very much, Vishal Bhai. And we look forward to receiving your suggestions, your ideas, anything to take this work further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mirbhai, for your thoughtful closing remarks and for guiding our way ahead. Of course, we have to have more and more efforts in capturing local experiences and processes that we will keep continue. On this Mr. Mandela Day, may we carry forward the message of action and equity, knowing that small acts, collectively action, bright, great change. On behalf of AIDMI and START Network, I express sincere gratitude to all our speakers, participants, and partners for being part of today's dialogue. Let us continue to co-create solutions that protect the most vulnerable from extreme heat. Thank you once again, and warm wishes from all of us at AIDMI. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Paul, as well, and all the participants from ADRRN. I'm so glad that you've been able to join, and we look forward to
Thank
your
you.
comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We had better though. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meg.
Thanks to all.
Thank you,
Yes,
Ramlalji.
of course. Ramlal,
you.
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Traorji, for your sharing and participation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course, Traore. Thank you so much.